Okay, that, by the way, is a shot of overlooking Omaha Beach in Normandy. It looks a little more peaceful than it did on June 6, 1944. So I thank my editor and photographer, Jim Karpachik, for putting that together. Time now to meet the boys. Wow, the boys. It's going to be a fun night. So if you like to laugh and learn about history, then these are the guys that you want to hear it from. So I'm going to open up the magic door and see if the wizard is ready. Babe went to the bathroom. We will move on. He played Joe Liebgott in Band of Brothers and was recently seen in the popular TV show White Collar, direct from Montreal, where he is on leave from the movie set. From the great country of Scotland, where they all talk funny, Mr. Ross McCall.
Boom, boom.
He played Frank Perconti in Band of Brothers. In his younger days, he also appeared in the movie Hook, directed by Steven Spielberg, and Basketball Diaries with a guy by the name of Leonardo DiCaprio. He is a great writer, producer, and actor, and despite the fact he is from New York City and a Yankees fan, he is a good guy too, Mr. James Matteo. Time now to meet our Easy Company veterans. He was wounded in episode 4 of Band of Brothers, the Replacements episode, coming to the aid of Lieutenant Robert Brewer, who was shot in the neck outside of Neuenen, Holland. Please welcome Easy Company medic, Mr. Al Mampry. Our next veteran was an original Toccoa man. He was seriously wounded in Carentan, France, just after D-Day. If you've seen the TV series, you remember the scene in the Carentan episode when the building he was clearing out was hit by a mortar round. In fact, Ross McCall, who played Joe Liebgott in the series, came to his aid in the HBO series. He is from the great state of Colorado and a big Denver Broncos fan, Mr. Ed Tipper. Hello, sir. Our final Easy Company veteran joining us tonight is simply known as Babe. He joined Easy as a replacement just after Normandy in a time for Operation Market Garden. In the TV series, he bumped into another South Philly guy named Wild Bill Garnier, and the two have been best friends ever since. He was featured throughout the final 7 episodes of Band of Brothers. Please welcome Edward Babe Heffron from South Philly. Our final guest tonight knows all too well the horror of war. He was 14 when the Nazis entered his city of Plotzk, Poland. His mother, father, and younger brother were murdered in the Treblinka concentration camp. He survived slave labor camps and finally a stay in the infamous Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. And he unfortunately has the tattoo on his arm to prove that. Please welcome Holocaust survivor, Mr. Israel Arbeiter. Gentlemen, please be seated. Have a seat. Relax. This evening, one of the interesting things we like to do is encourage audience participation. So if you have a question about the series, if you have a question about what it was like to be in Auschwitz, we are going to be passing around a microphone tonight, and we encourage you to please ask questions. We want it, again, to be as interactive as possible because so many of you have seen the series. So many of you have read about Auschwitz and the killing of over 1 million people in the most infamous concentration camp in World War II. So we're going to start the panel off with a couple of questions from the floor down here. And then please don't be shy. Please raise your hand when we call for it, and we'll get some great audience participation from you guys tonight. So we're going to begin actually with a question tonight for the actors, for Jimmy Matteo and Ross McCall. We've talked about this in the past, that Jimmy, Ross, and I, about what it was like to play these men, these veterans, and what it took. And it took a lot more than people realize. And these guys went through a boot camp. And they were put through boot camp by Dale Dye, who played Colonel Sink in Band of Brothers. And Dale Dye loves to put people through boot camps because Dale Dye was a highly decorated officer in Vietnam. And he's also a very talented actor. So in order to play these guys, they had to experience their own form of boot camp. And Ross and Jimmy, we'll start with Ross. What was it like heading into this and your expectations, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, this is a pretty serious thing we're doing?
Well, for me it was, these guys are sick of hearing this, but being from the British Isles, I didn't really know too much about a boot camp. And so when I was told I was going to boot camp, it kind of sounded like fun to me. And I guess the moment I realized that maybe this was going to be, let's call it an enlightening moment in my life, was when I got all the guys got a letter through the mail, and it was hand-typed from Captain Dye, and it was dated 1940. And he was welcoming all of us to join this boot camp. And he told us what we were allowed to bring. And I had my Nikes ready, I had my sweatpants ready, and I was told to bring nothing except the uniform that we'd be wearing, and maybe one pair of sweats, I think. We weren't allowed any reading material except for religious reading material. Obviously, this was before iPhones and you know, internet access everywhere you go. So we could handwrite letters, and that was basically it. We were told to bring one green towel, and I remember being kind of, you know, really, it has to be green? I gotta, okay. And so I get to the studio, and still, you know, I'm aware that we're going to training. I'm aware that the shape that we have to be in to match what these men were in. And I knew it was going to be a slug, but I had no idea that it was going to be such a slug. And from day one, I think within 5 minutes, we were screamed at, yelled at, made to do push-ups in front of, you know, people we didn't know, newfound friends, new actors. That I'm like, really? I got to do 20 push-ups in front of this kid? This is okay. And we did it, and everybody dug deep. And I've got to say, it turned out to be one of the most exhilarating and exciting experiences of my life. It was, we always argue about this. Some people say, yeah, we're in boot camp for 3 months. We weren't. We were there for, you know, 2 weeks, I think. 2.5.
18 days.
Yeah.
I know.
Maybe I just forgot a lot of it. Maybe
Yeah, I think so.
you know.
3 months. I think
yeah,
3.5 months.
18 months
Yeah,
we were
yeah.
in boot camp, and it was amazing. And what was great about it was we all stayed in the period. We all stayed in our character names. In fact, a story that we've told many times is we didn't know any of the guys' real names for a good 6 months. I mean, I was calling Jimmy Perko for a good year after the show, I think.
Yeah, maybe more.
And yeah. And so we were all in character. We all knew what we had to portray in these men, and we knew we had to do it justice. So there wasn't any laziness. There wasn't any whining. Everybody dug deep, and it was hard, man. And from what I've heard, actor boot camp, you know, can be a little easygoing. Dale Dye, who's a dear, dear friend of ours now, trust me, he wasn't then, but now he tells it. I mean, he put us through our paces. I don't remember the last time I ran a mile, and all of a sudden I'm asked to run 5 miles every morning. And you know, back in those days, we were all a little younger. We were all perhaps, you know, into smoking or drinking or whatever it was, and so probably weren't the fittest that we could have been. And by God, they whipped us into shape pretty quickly. But also what it did for me was it put me in a mental space, and it put me in a space of bonding the guys. And I've said this from day one of the shoot. The genius stroke that the producers made of our show is putting us in a boot camp, because it made us tight, and it made us a unit. And speaking to servicemen and women around the world since, that's the one common factor I hear, is that boot camp just unites you. And that's what it did. It gave me 10 immediate brothers. I mean, 30, really. But, I mean, you know, there was 10 close-knit guys from the show. And it bonded us to a place where we could be believable as these good men. We could actually show the world what a tight unit these men were, what Easy Company was. And to me, that was the genius stroke that our big boys pulled off. And I'm sure glad I went through it. And I would do another boot camp tomorrow. I really would. It was hard. We hit walls. It was painful at times. It was we were sleep deprived, but it was nothing. And we knew it was not a scratch on what these men were about to portray had gone through. And so with that in our heads, we knuckled down and did it. And I'll be forever grateful, I think. So there's my story.
Jimmy?
I echo a lot that Ross
Don't,
said.
because that would be boring.
Yeah, it would. It was.
You know.
That was
Well,
so. But first off, it's and I speak for Russ in this. It's tough for us to sit up here and Babe and these men have heard this many times. It's tough for us to sit up here with these guys and tell you about our boot camp. I mean, I like to let them talk first, Tim. This is the first time you've done this, so it's actors boot camp, but to us it was something really special. He mentioned 20 push-ups. I don't think I've ever done 20. I remember it being more like 50 each time we hit the deck, because I was always in trouble. But and I snuck a camera on. I didn't bring my green towel, but I did sneak a camera. But when I came from, the streets of the Bronx, and we had our own little, concrete war going there. So I had no idea what I was in for when I got off that bus. And when we landed, they sort of put us in a hangar. They shaved our heads. Well, not shaved it because they didn't have shave, but they gave us haircuts, from the era, and they gave us a big green bag. I'm not even kidding. The bag was the size of me. And it was just a couple of toiletries, a towel, some socks, and whatever you need to live by. And then they threw us on a bus. And like he said, we didn't know anybody's name. And I just remember getting off that bus. And a lot of people have heard this story, the Luzzes, and a lot of people here have heard this. A few people I've met quite a few times here. And I got off the bus. And no one really spoke on the bus. Everybody was really like, what's going on? We didn't expect this, like, okay, I don't really know who you are. I just got a haircut. I'm on a bus. I don't have my phone. I don't have anything. I just have a green bag. And now what's going on? Now I start to go, well, okay. I thought I'm filming a show. I'm used to, like, the perks. And I just get off. I remember getting off that bus, and a cadre member came up to me, and he singled me out right away when we all started getting in a line. He's looking at me, and he ran right up to me. He, made a beeline to me, and he said, "Oh, we got a short guy in our platoon. Oh, I can't." He started screaming in my face, "Get in line, shorty!" And I just remember going, "Hey, buddy, listen, no one speaks to me like that. I'm from the Bronx. I got a Napoleon's complex, and you're about to see it." But for some reason, I don't know what, it made me go. And I didn't answer him, and he goes, "Get down and give me 20. And I'm like, 20? I'll give you those on one hand, buddy. What do you need? You need 50 of these? And it just, we all bonded at that moment. But Ross was saying you had to jog 5 miles. We jogged, and forgive me, guys, I know you did a lot more than this, so cover your ears. We jogged 5 miles before we even ate anything. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
We got up and jogged 5 miles. Then we ate. I was like, wait a minute, you're going to feed us? And then we
25 miles we did.
Yeah, it's like
25
110.
miles a day.
We did curry heat 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and then we did some weapons training, some, maneuvers and all that stuff. But, it was very smart on, Tom and Steven and the companies to sort of set that up to make it, to make it work that way. Because when you actually got to, to filming, these directors would come up to you and they would say to you, okay, so you play Perconti. And they were all great, the directors. They'd be like, so listen, you're cold, you're homesick, you're hungry, and, you're tired. And you would just say, okay, roll the camera, because I'm cold, I'm homesick, I'm hungry. Roll the camera, why don't you? You're going to get what you need. So it got to that point, and boot camp built that.
Yeah, and they also trained us to a way that, they could at any point during the series say, hey, you know what, throw a hand grenade, or reload your M1, or, they would give you a direction that if you didn't have training, you would have to bring somebody in to do. So, it was just smart that you never they never cut in for anybody else reloading. It was all us.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick example of that, and I'm sure you wanted to get to these guys. Later on in the episode, you showed up on set, and I remember one of the directors coming up to me. Like I said, they all were fantastic, and they said, Perconti, and I said, yes. He goes, that's your platoon? That's your squad? I said, yeah, that's my squad. And they said, okay, so here's where my cameras are, here's a hedge, here's where you're going to go and bring these guys, and you just have to go, well, where's your cameras? And he said, right there. And I go, and where are they? They're there. Okay. Is this Bond in your shot? And they would say, yeah, I'm seeing everything to Bond. And you go, I'm not going behind a hedge. There's a Bond right here. I'm going behind the Bond. I'm not going to go behind trees, a hedge. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, you're right. And even most of them knew stuff like that, but it's sometimes you had to sort of just say, hey, I think this might work a little bit. I'm going to get in trouble if I don't open my mouth. And the big guys see that I didn't. So, yeah, you had that sort of thing going on. It's great.
I have a question for Al Mampri. Al, when someone says you guys are heroes, I know the first reaction right down the line in most veterans that I've ever talked to, when someone says that you guys are heroes, you always say the heroes are the guys who never came home, the guys who were buried over in Margraten in the Normandy American Cemetery and in Belgium and Luxembourg. Those are the heroes of World War II. How often do you think about those guys who never came home?
Well, I actually, after the war, I went back to school and I put the war behind me and went on with my life. And I didn't really start thinking about fellows that we left behind and my fellows that were still here until just recently when I'm pretty well retired and I began attending some of these kinds of affairs. And I began to realize that there was a whole part of my life that I'd sort of forgotten. And actually have forgotten, and occasionally something comes up or someone says something that triggers a memory. But I do think of the people there. I was at Margaret. I didn't want to go to Margaret because to me it was like going to Gettysburg where all those people were slaughtered and wounded and everything like that. But I'm glad I went, and my daughter was with me. And I saw what the way they were taking care of those graves. Each grave was taken care of by a civilian, just immaculate. You couldn't believe how wonderful that cemetery is. And they were truly honored, and I was glad I went. But I do think about them more and more, it seems like, every day. Yes. And it's a sad thing.
Mr. Tipper, the next question is for you. If anyone out there has seen the episode in Carentan when you were in the building and the mortar shell hit, it was a devastating injury to you. And I know while there is no humor behind that, I know you've told me a story in the past about how the guys actually thought that day that you were killed.
Yeah, that's true. And I didn't find this out till a couple of years after the war. Floyd Talbert was there when I was hit. And I was very severely wounded, and the top of my head was about half off, I guess. But I spent a year in Army hospitals, and I guess it looked worse than it would. I put my hand up, my helmet was knocked over. My whole head felt like a watermelon and mushy and soft. And I can understand. Talbert looked at this and thought he saw me killed, and he just turned away. And back when I was in the States 6 or 8 months later, I went to visit Talbert's parents, and because I was in a hospital in Indianapolis, and they were up in a place called Greentown, Indiana, near Kokomo. And his mother wrote him. Ed Tipper came to visit from the hospital, and he wrote back immediately, "That guy that claims to be Tipper is an imposter. Call the MPs and get him put in jail where he belonged, because I saw Ed Tipper killed." And of course we got all that straightened out a couple of years later.
Babe, when you came in as a replacement before Operation Market Garden, what was your concept of war in terms of what it would be like, and how was it different than what it was actually when you got into Holland and started fighting?
Well, I remember, could I stand?
You can do anything you want.
I ain't got a gun. When I was it was in the 30s, early 30s, I happened to be sitting on a step in South Philly. You want to know about war, the first time you get a taste of it. And I sat next to an old lady. She was a neighbor for years. She was up there in years, same as I am now. And a man was coming up the street. And this was about 1932. And I was maybe 9 or 10 years old. And the man was coming up the street, and he was walking, and the cement cracks a block squares, and he was walking, and he wouldn't step on the crack. And he walked all the way up the street like that. He was going to Mass. And I said to Mrs. Lyons, why is he won't touch them cracks. She said that man was gassed in the First World War. And this is what war does to you. So I went home and said to my mother, well, Ma, Mrs. Lyons said that he was in the First World War, that he was gassed, the man that won't step on the cracks in the cement. And my mother, of course, she was always very, very into the house. She never would leave the house. And Irish, red hair, quite a temper. And having 4 boys, I guess that was part of it. And anyhow, she said, and I'm sitting there by myself, and she said, well, let me tell you, when she was mad, she called me Edward. When she wasn't mad, it was Babe. So I knew she was in a good mood because she called me Babe. So she said, Babe, let me tell you something. Your father wasn't in the First World War. But let me tell you, that son of a bitch is gassed. So I said, well, I didn't know. And me, not knowing I'm 9 years old, I said, did he work for the gas company? She said, you're like your father. And my father, one day, it's true what I'm telling you, my father was out at the Republican Club all night. He come home about 4 o'clock in the morning. And we had all just come back from Mass. I was sitting at the breakfast table, and we were almost finished. And my dad come downstairs, and my mother's in the kitchen, and he said, yo, Ann. My mother said, yeah, Joe. This fish is cold. He always ate sea bass in the morning. This fish is cold. So my youngest brother said to him, Dad, you were out at the club till 3 or 4 this morning. We heard you come in. My mother didn't say nothing. He said, Ann. Said, Joe, I'll be right in. And she come in. She had a knife in her hand. But she was using that for cutting meat, I guess, or something. We got a little nervous. But she said to my father had his back turned, he was talking to my younger brother. And she said, Joe, and he turned around and he said, yeah, Ryan. She said, go shit in your hat. And we sat there.
Hey, babe, we may have to edit that out a little bit we may have to edit that for C-SPAN, but don't worry about it.
Well, I don't know that. I'm telling the truth here.
I know you are.
If you want to hide things, I don't belong here. I'm only trying to do what's right here.
You're doing fine. You're doing fine.
Make sure you edit that. I'm done.
So Mom was bossing the house, is what you're trying to say.
Am I all right now?
Mom was bossing the house.
Yeah, she certainly is.
Yes, she certainly was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's, Izzy. A lot of people, know about Auschwitz. They know about the conditions. They can read about it. They can watch it in a documentary. Could you describe what the conditions were like at Auschwitz to those who never lived through what you lived through?
Yeah, first of all, let me say it's a pretty tough act to follow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I'm only telling the truth.
You are following a guy who tells the truth. He tells it like it is, and we love him for it.
Hey, that's the way we talk in the corner. Can't hide anything. They all know you.
You remember I asked you outside whether this is going to be a comedy show.
Yes.
because that's all I heard was jokes and all kind of stories.
I know, I know,
Not
I
a
know.
comedy show. It's true to life.
Right.
It's the earliest form of the reality TV show. Babe should have his own reality TV show, and he would put the Kardashians to shame. There's no question about it. So
Okay, so let me go back to reality.
let's go back to Auschwitz.
You asked me whether I can tell what it was like in Auschwitz.
Can you convey it?
Number one, how much time have I got for that?
We're going to keep it short, so you have to do the condensed Auschwitz version, which is not easy to do, I know.
The reason why I'm asking, because it is very difficult or practically impossible to tell you in the few minutes what Auschwitz was like. So let me just say in general, I don't know how many you people saw movies about the Holocaust, how many books you were reading, what you know about the Holocaust, what you know about Auschwitz. In general, the former Chancellor of Germany, Helmut Kohl, on the 50th anniversary of liberation of Auschwitz, said Auschwitz is the darkest chapter in German history. It is, even for me, for one that was living in Auschwitz, living in Auschwitz, existing in Auschwitz, it's impossible to describe, even if you'll give me the rest of the evening, of what a death camp. You must remember, Auschwitz was not only a concentration camp, it was a death camp. Auschwitz was one of 6 death camps in Poland, where when I was there in 1944, what was called the busiest time, 10,000 people, please, we're talking about 10,000 human beings were being gassed, cremated in Auschwitz. Every day, transports were arriving from all over Europe. Men, women, children, babies. The ones like myself that were picked out for my transport to place for slave labor for work, some were thinking and talking out loud, not knowing who is better off. Their relatives, their friends, who were sent this morning from their transport to the gas chambers, or those the ones that were picked to live in the camp. That's what the situation was. Every day, people not being able to take the conditions, live under those conditions, threw themselves on the high voltage wires and were executed. I don't know where to start to be able to get into details. But in general, Auschwitz was something that never existed before in the history of the world. And I hope and pray that it will never happen again anywhere in any part of the world against any people.
Babe, when you were in Europe, Easy Company liberated a concentration camp, which was a sub-camp of Dachau. It was called Landsberg. Landsberg, Germany. What do you say to those people who deny that the Holocaust ever happened, from somebody who saw it personally?
You ain't allowed to curse here. And this is what I tell them. In no uncertain terms, it was there. It was there. Just as this gentleman said, the German people denied it. The villagers that lived around the camp said they never saw it, they don't know about it. But our company commander, Winters, said, well, I don't believe it, because you're going to come in here, you're going to clean it up, you're going to get these bodies and put them on the, where they can be buried properly. And it was mighty odd. Nobody gave them any mask or any kind of medical coverage for their faces. But when they come in to do the job of moving their own people in the camp, the Jewish people were laying there, the ones that were alive, which I want to tell you also, the movie version is quite a little bit different. We couldn't get near them, we couldn't hug them, they wanted to, and it was a sad, sad thing. And I remember one Jewish fellow, very thin, well, they were all very thin. I remember him trying to talk in English. And one of the other Jewish inmates said to us as a group, especially Eddie Stein, who happened to be one of our boys, Jewish descent from St. Louis, he said, I think he said it right. He said, he is an American, but he can't say it. He can't talk. But we know he is an American. So they pulled him out. I don't know what happened. Nobody knows, because it was very, I can't tell you because it's not to be told. It's something, the gentleman here to my left is saying it right. May you never, never see anything like it again. Because it's something you dream about, something that you go to bed thinking about. It's very sad when man can do to man. But when these German people walked into that camp, they all had surgical masks on. Why they had surgical masks on? They must have knew what they were going to face. Where'd they get them from? But the German villages do, because I'll tell you why. The stench would tell you something's wrong in that section of that little village. I don't know how many years they were there, but somebody knew they were there, and somebody has to tell somebody else. Word gets around, but they didn't care. Nobody came. Nobody made an effort. They let things go the way they were. Boxcars full. Bodies on top of one another. And Eddie Stein said to me, Abe, they're my people. I said, Ed, there are people. But it won't be long. They'll be out of here. Him and Joe Lieb got. And any one of you, this gentleman said it all. It's awful. You don't want to ever see it. There's a man who went through it. He can't talk about it. I can't talk about it. And I only saw it.
Thank you, babe.
I just want you to know that. It's very sad. And I live with it like he does. But it's something that's supposed and should be I just wish I could get into detail about it, but I can't. I can't. It's not acting, it's the truth. You can't.
Very emotional. Thank you, Babe. One of the hardest episodes for the actors to film was the concentration camp episode in Landsberg. Ross had a prominent role in that, and Jimmy obviously was featured as well. Could you guys address how that was set up by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks? And there was a little bit of a surprise for the actors filming this episode as well, correct?
Yeah. You know, that was we knew the episode was coming, and that was a big conversation that they had with me. Liebgott was, I think, one of 2 Jewish company members that were featured in the show. And so the producers had talked to me early on and said, we think it's probably a good idea if we send you to one of the camps in Europe to go see it now. And that sat really strangely with me. You know, I believe everybody should be aware of it, and everybody should see what went on out there in the ruins that they are now. And I think everybody needs to be privy to that. But for the job, I knew that nobody had witnessed these camps until Easy Company came across Landsberg. And I kind of wanted to convey that as much as I could in a realistic enough way. And so I said, I'm not going to go. I don't want to go. I want to see it on film. I want to see it on film for the first time. So we shot the show in Europe, all over the place, Switzerland and England and stuff. But for the camp, they built a camp. And they built a camp in the middle of a forest that was, 20, 25-minute drive from our base camp. And the first time I saw it was the first time we saw it on film. And they recreated something that was just, man, I don't know. When I first saw it, I couldn't believe that Hollywood had made something for us to see. But also just hearing the stories from the men, hearing Israel's stories right now. I mean, I kind of feel pathetic even talking about it in a Hollywood way. But it was important that we showed this episode. It was important that everybody's aware of the situation that happened in Nazi Germany, and everybody is horrified by it. But to truly get as close as you can in today's society to this thing was heartbreaking's not enough, man. It's just you can't fathom it. You can't fathom that, people actually put time and effort in to build these things and then to imprison human beings, man. I mean, it's just, anyway, I'm digressing. The camp itself that we used for the show was just as real as they could make it, to show the world. We're hoping that the show was going to be as big as it was, and to show the world what it must have been like for Easy Company, for any man or woman to see this firsthand and to experience what these people went through, And I remember showing up, and we had, even went as far as getting animatronics made, because we couldn't get anybody as emaciated as we were finding in the pictures. And so there was a lot of body makeup used on guys who were of slender build, but even then we used green screen to just convey the brutality of this situation. And it was really hard on me. I mean, I'm not trying to, it was a hard thing just because I knew I'd grown with Joe Liebgo. I mean, I'd grown with him. He'd become a part of me, and all of a sudden, I'm seeing this as much as I can through his eyes. You know, I know it's a film set. I get that, but they made a wonderful effort to make this be as shocking and as heartbreaking and as realistic as humanly possible, and that did it for me. And just, you know, I'm not Jewish, so I wanted to study the Jewish faith. I wanted to get into Joe's skin a little bit, and when this episode came along, as important as it was for the show, it just, you know, we all lost something that episode. That was a rough time, but it was important, you know, and we have to continue telling that story. You know, it can never ever be forgotten. It can never be, you know, remotely discussed that it didn't happen. And so hopefully we managed to do that with the show.
Jimmy?
Yeah, we got the. I remember us getting. We had good times as we shot. I mean, we joked around a lot. We had fun, as you can tell. And I just remember getting the memo that this is going to be a very hard episode, and let's just focus and concentrate on the job at hand. And then David Frankel directed that episode. You know, terrific director, and. Word came down that David had family that spent some time in the camps, and so I think all the jokes went away for that month, and it was all. I remember it being set up. The world was set up, like he said, before we even got to the set. When we got to the set, everything was set up already. All the extras, and they were all terrific and dedicated, were set up, and the fencing and the huts and forgive me, I mean truly forgive me. It was just very. It was very hard to pull up and just look around, and it was just quiet, man. Not too many people were saying many things, and the jokes stopped, and it was a very, very hard episode. It was a really hard episode, and David was great. David Frankel was great, but you saw, you know, what you saw. You know, it was a powerful one, and hopefully we did, you know, a fraction of what maybe, you know, I mean, what really happened. But yeah, it was a very tough episode. And here,
interesting. A lot of the fans from the show actually would single that episode out in particular, of being, you know, obviously the most heart-wrenching, but one of the most memorable, which I always found, you know, fascinating and wonderful that people really did click into that. You know, they wanted to know about it. They wanted to learn about it. So.
Yeah.
We're going to open it up to some questions. I have one final question, gentlemen, for you, and we'll open it up to some questions from the audience, so please get your questions ready. When you talk about the television series, were you guys happy? Did they do a good job portraying what war was like, or can you portray that on TV? Ed?
Well, some of it was so realistic it shook me up. The anti-aircraft fire, and people have asked me, well, isn't that a big exaggeration that Hollywood used all their special effects? I said, oh no, this was exactly the way it happened. But they took liberties in a couple of cases, and early on, after the jump, when Private Al Blythe confessed to an officer that he'd hid in a ditch or something, and he didn't quite know what to do. He was very sympathetic. The officer that I know would never have been sympathetic to him. He wouldn't have shot him or anything, but he would have said, "You don't belong in this outfit. Get out." And I guess there was some dramatic reason for putting that in, but the book I think was much more accurate, and yet nobody can ever describe to anybody else what war is like unless they've been in it. We, for probably 60 or 70 years after the war, almost none of us talked to our families. I taught school all those years. I didn't tell my kids war stories or anything. And it's so horrible, it's so wasteful, and you just can't talk to anybody about it unless he's experienced it himself and knows what you're talking about.
Babe, how about you? How do you feel as though they did with the TV series in terms of accuracy and portraying war?
Well, my personal feeling, and I don't want you to get irrigated. I don't, because you're going to say, you know, I'm not a jokester and I'm only telling the truth and that's what I'm here for. But they should have had more little details in the movie to at least, beside the killing, make people laugh that's in the audience, in their parlor. I don't care where the TV is, in the kitchen. Because I remember one scene that actually happened with me, of course, with my platoon. And we were in the packing shed, and we were putting on our material to jump with, grenades, machine guns, bandoliers of ammo, 30s, whatever was required. And one of the guys come up, he had 2 bandoliers of ammo. And he said, Bill was Wild Bill, the platoon sergeant. Bill, I got 2 bandoliers of ammo here. What do you want me to do with them? Bill said, give them to Heffron. So he walks over and he gives them to me. So I throw them over me. Now another guy comes through. He says, I got 2 grenades, Bill. What do you want me to do with them? Bill said, give them to Heffron. I got the 2 grenades. I pin them right here. I had the 2 metal caps. Another guy come up, and he had 2 grenades. So Bill house, I know, give him the Heffron. And I said, yeah, give me them. And I took them, I put one here and one there in the jump pads. Now another guy comes up, and he's got a small box. I don't know what was in there. He said, Bill, what am I going to do with this? And I shouted, give it to Heffron. He walked over, and he goes to give it to me. And Bill said, wait a minute, hold that a minute. And the reason I'm telling you this story, these gentlemen here, these 2 fine guys here on the end, the actors, great guys. You got to be with them to know them. But anyhow, that's why I'm telling you this story. Because it makes me look a little bit short, as he mentioned, short. So I said, wait a minute. The Bill said, no, you. Come on, Heffron, come over here. I want to talk to you. I said, what is it, Bill? You're giving me everything in the platoon to jump with. He said, we're jumping in Holland, ain't we? I said, yeah. Okay. What's that got to do with me? He said, let me tell you something. How much you weigh? I said, 138 pounds. How tall are you? I said, 5'4½". 5'4½". You got to put that half in there. I said, because I am 5'4½". He said, no, Eddie Joint's taller than you. He's 4'5". I said, I ain't got nothing to do with Eddie Joint, right, Ed? And then he said, yeah, well, you know, Bill. He said, look, let me tell you guys what this is all about. Babe, you're 138 pounds, you're 5'4½". Let me tell you something. I asked you, we're jumping in Holland. I said, yes, we know we're going to jump in Holland. He said, well, God damn it. And he may have cursed. I don't want to curse. He said, let me tell you something. You son of a bitch. We're jumping in Holland. The reason you got that, we don't want to go looking for you in Spain. And I wanted to fight every son of a bitch. I did. I wanted to fight. I just got burned up. See, the movies don't have that.
Yeah.
And I got a little bit irrigated over the whole thing. I mean, Bill, a pal, you had to be.
Thanks for not swearing.
Thanks.
Al, there's an interesting story about you and Lieutenant Brewer. There's a scene when you guys are outside of Neunen where Lieutenant Brewer is out ahead of the column, and Michael Cudlitz's character, Bull Randleman, said, "Doesn't he make a fine target?" or something about Patton. Look at General Patton. Yeah. Brewer gets hit. You go to his aid as a medic. Could you finish that story? It has a little bit of humor to it.
Well, I'm right back to E Company again, because initially I was in E Company as an infantryman and became a medic. And we're in this Holland situation, and they're calling for a medic up front. And we were in a little light woods, and I said, well, there are medics up in front. And I told the battalion surgeon that I was going to check on it. He said, "Goodbye, Al." Anyway, so I went up. I said, "What's the problem up here?" And they pointed over a little ditch they were down in. They're pointing out in the field. There was a fellow lying in the middle of that field between 4 houses and the woods. And they had fallen back. E Company had fallen back when the German opened up on them. And yeah, I understand Brewer was out there waving like he was charging like an old Western, you know. And so I went out there, and it was quiet. No sense crawling out there or anything like that. I'd been hurt on the jump anyway. And I was down there, and I looked at him. He looked like death warmed over. So I told him I was there, and I would take care of him. And I had plasma, and I finally got a vein that I could get some plasma into. And then I was holding the bottle up there. And meanwhile, the medic that was supposed to be there came out, and the German opened up on us again, and he got clipped in the heel, so he took off, went back to the rest of the E Company. And then I heard a crack, and I thought, oh boy, they broke the bottle. After all that trouble, you're not thinking about what's actually going on, you know, just the problem that they've created for you. And so then the dirt was kicking up around me, and I said, oh. So I was lying down, and in my best bedside manner, I said, "Lieutenant, are you still alive?" And I finished this sentence because I said, "If you're not, I think I better leave." He was croaking. He was shot right through the neck here. And he said, he croaked out that no, but he didn't know why he was still alive. I said, "Well, I'll stay with you." Well, the Dutch people came out. Well, 3 of my guys, 3 of the E Company came out there to help. They got shot. So there are now more of us that are wounded. And the Dutch guys came out from those houses. Those Dutch had guts, I tell you. They came out, and they had a ladder with them, and they put Brewer on the ladder, and they're going to take him, and they take him to where the houses are, where the German is upstairs in the other. Oh, my patient's going the wrong way, and so, and meanwhile I got kicked like a mule when I got hit a couple times, and my leg wouldn't do anything but stay like this. But there was a ditch going right to the houses, and I was able to get to they wanted to take my boot off because they thought they were going to help me. But it was right above the boot, and so I insisted on keeping on. Gave myself a shot of morphine so I wouldn't go into shock. And meanwhile, one of the Dutchmen picked up Brewer's carbine, and he had altered it to where it would fire 30 shots. He had a double thing there, and it would fire 30 shots like an automatic weapon. He pointed it towards those houses and fired it, and all 30 shots went out. We threw it down. Anyway, we get back to the house, and there are 4 of us now in there, and I was getting a little nauseous, and the place was immaculate, and I couldn't speak Dutch, and the woman was in there. But while I was getting to the house, some woman down 3 houses down, there were 4 in a row. The end one was hollering, "Tote, tote." Well, I knew what that meant. Dead. Someone's dead. Well, there wasn't anything I could do for that person. It wasn't until just recently I realized that maybe that person was shot by the German, shot by the Dutchman when he fired off that way, or fired by us when we came through again, you know. But it's haunted me ever since. Things like that do bother you for a long time, don't they? And we got patch. Oh, I warned her that I was going to throw up. You know, she came with a bowl and everything. I was being considerate. We got out to the crossroads there. One leading to Eindhoven. We were right on the edge of Eindhoven, and the other one leading back to Zaan, this town we came through when we dropped in. And we were arguing there. I wanted to go back to Zaan, and there was a doctor and a couple other Dutchmen. They wanted to go towards Eindhoven. Well, what settled it was a platoon of Germans came around from behind those houses, a little bit further out, and they started firing at us. They took off. They had a double-decker or something, little cart, and they'd put the guys on there, and they were running down the road towards Zaan. And I couldn't run, so I dove into a German-type round foxhole. And two Dutchmen pulled me out, put me on a wheelbarrow, and they were going with one on each handle, running down the road. And the Germans figured we weren't worth the trouble, so they stopped firing at us. But it's interesting what happens when you're in a situation like that.
Thank you, Al. Babe, before we take some questions, I know you have one story that you always like to share about the Dutch and about a little old woman.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, I like to tell that one.
Yeah, go ahead. And then we'll open it up to questions.
This is very serious because it's a woman's involved in it. It's not dirty, it's just has to be told. We were the first platoon into Eindhoven, the second platoon of Easy Company. We were the first squad, Joe Toy's squad. I was machine gunner, and they said, Bill said, put your gun here, point it to that secondary road up there. It's the only road they can come in. Okay, Bill. Throw the gun down. Oh, I should tell you, I didn't end up in Spain either. But I pointed the gun towards the secondary road, and there was 3 Dutch underground guys, and they were really good. They were there. Unlike the French, the Dutch were there. That's true. But anyhow, to get back to that, I'm glad I interjected about the French. But these 3 underground guys asked Lieutenant Compton, who had just passed away, he was 90, and they asked him, could you permit us, there's a horse and wagon coming up this road, it's got 8 German soldiers on it, 4 on each side, and they have an artillery piece they're pulling in back of the wagon. Would you give us permission to take it out? And Compton said, let me tell you, under these people for 5 years, you got our opinion to do it. You go ahead and do it, knock them out, kill them all. So we all agreed. Anyhow, these Dutchmen get in the doorways, and they let them have it. They had automatic weapons, and the Germans were flying over the wagon like this, backwards. And one of them was about 6'2", 3, whatever, blonde hair, blue eyes, regular Aryan looking, and he had been hit in the shoulder. And one of our men brought him up, said, we're going to take him for questioning, then we'll take him to the medic. We didn't care either way. And anyhow, a little old Dutch lady, she wasn't wide enough to bless herself. She was about 83 years old in that area. She was older than us. We were 18 or 19. But she asked the German soldier where it hurt. So the German soldier, he's a lot taller than me right now, I'm sitting. But he said, here, oh. She had a handbag, and she waffled him with the handbag. And he said, oh. And we were sitting there on the gun. We're happy. Beat the hell out of me. And he's still hurting. And and she hit him again with the handbag. Nobody's feeling sorry for the poor Kraut. And I say poor Kraut. He had more money in his pocket, I guess, than we did. But anyhow, she going to wrap him again, and here comes the underground. And they pick her up bodily. They said, Mama, come. And they take her away. And we said, what'd you do that for? Gee, she deserved to do it. Said, well, we had to take her away. We want him for questioning. And she had a brick in the handbag. Now that poor little old lady, we felt sorry for her. Oh, boy. She put a brick in the handbag. And she beat the hell out of me. And we all gave her a nice round of applause. We thought the world of that. That was really. It was one of the finest scenes I ever remember about war.
Al, go
I
ahead.
have a tiny vignette here to tell you about when we first came into Zaan. The Dutch people all came out in their finery and they were waving their flags, and then the firing started down the street. They all disappeared, and I stepped back in the doorway, and a hand came out, and I know it was a woman's hand. I'm not that dumb, you know. And a hand came out with a spoon and some cherries in it, and fed me the cherries, and the hand went back. And the firing stopped, and I took off down the street. I never did see who it was. To this day, I would like to see who it was and thank him.
Oh, man.
Sounds like the first drive-through. We'd like to take an opportunity now to take some questions from the audience. I know a lot of you obviously have a lot of questions. So we have Scott Hinton up there. The handsome gentleman up there has a microphone, and we'll start right over there. And you just, the handsome gentleman here, Mr. George Luz Jr., whose father was featured prominently in Band of Brothers. George's father was the funny guy in Band of Brothers who kept everybody loose during some really tough times. And George is just like his dad. He's got quite the sense of humor. So well, we like to say that as a disclaimer. We have a first question up there. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Jim Carter from Wakefield. Last February 2011, there was an email came around about Shifty and not being honored in 2009 by Major General Chuck Yeager. So Chuck was my boss during the Vietnam War. So I honored Shifty in a dinner April 9 last year, and had 140 guests and made everybody aware of Band of Brothers.
Thank you very much. We should mention Shifty Powers was a gentleman he was talking about. Shifty was the expert rifleman, the sharpshooter in Easy Company, and was featured throughout the series. I believe he was the only one featured in every episode. Is that true?
No, a couple of the guys were.
Really?
Yeah,
What do I know?
It's a good handful.
Yeah, but
It's a
Shifty.
nice story, though.
Huh? Al?
Shifty Powers, I think, was a guy, when we first went on the firing range, that I bet him a candy bar he couldn't hit the bullseye. 8 candy bars later, he hit every bullseye, and I didn't lose any more because I didn't have any more. And that was Shifty Powers. I didn't realize what I was dealing with.
Shifty Powers was certainly one of the most well-known Band of Brothers. Question right here.
Hi, my name is Joe Blansfield, and I have a question for Al Membry. We chatted a little bit earlier outside from one medic to another. I'm just curious, did you choose to be a medic, or did the Army choose you to be a medic?
Well, the Army chose to ask me.
And what additional training did you get in preparation for what you were about to?
Oh, I had good training. I was a Boy Scout. The fellow that started about the same time I did at Toccoa also had Boy Scout training, and basically that's what we had. We had a little bit of training, but not very much, not what they have today. It's wonderful today. By the way, this fellow Brewer that we were talking about, he ended up singing in the choir and everything, so he was okay.
It's great.
But we didn't have any. We used our heads and our hands and whatever. good sense if we had any.
Over here, Brian.
Hi, my question is for Mr. Tipper. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about your experiences right after Carentan.
My hearing is not real
He
great.
would like
Could
to
you-
know about your experiences right after Carentan. And
Well,
big
Carentan was
shift.
my last effort in the war. I was hit in Carentan, and we did something that I think probably only the paratroopers could have done. We had a battalion of 800 men, went single file all night long to the south of Carentan, and got in them ready for an attack that morning. Single file, one person make a mistake, and this whole thing is gone. But we did it, and 800 men made that trip. So we got set up in a place where the Germans had no expectation of any attack at all. And we attacked, and we had them outgunned, and we were moving them back, and things were looking pretty good. And the actual incident in which I was wounded, we were inexperienced, but suddenly we realized maybe this was a little too easy. And we were at a crossroads, a three-way crossroads, and there were some houses. If we moved ahead a little bit, these houses would be behind us, and somebody thought, well, maybe Germans are in these houses. So in the movies, you check a house for snipers or people in a German enemy. You pull a grenade and throw it in. I didn't have any grenades. We just had to kick the doors in without a grenade, but we did it. And the first house I came to, I kicked that door in and went in, and there was nobody in the house at all. And so I went out to look in the back. There was a backyard, a stone fence about 6 or 7 feet high. Nobody I could see, and there was I think was an outhouse connected to the house. And I thought, well, maybe there's somebody in there. And I called them, come out with their hands up, and nobody answered. So I put a couple of shots into that outhouse for good luck, and thought, well, this hot. And I went back out and hollered. I went upstairs too. Nobody was upstairs. Came back down. I yelled across the street to the guy that was covering me, this house is clear. And a little bit later, we waited and waited for a few minutes, and then suddenly I had this tremendous impact. I didn't feel any pain, didn't even hear any noise, I don't think. Tremendous impact that knocked me back, and the training I had was so good that I didn't drop my rifle. I still held my rifle up, and I thought, well, there's a German who I've missed. He's tossed a grenade in, and he's coming in. I turned around. I was all ready to take care of him, and then nothing happened. So I went to the front. Liebgott was over across the street, and he yelled to me, "Hey!" And I came to the door, and he came running over and told me it's a mortar shell. So there was not anybody throwing a grenade in. And that was really the end of my war in Carentan. The situation was that the Germans, when they were retreating, they had set up almost a measured distance, and they knew we would be coming up to that crossroads. And they were a little bit more experienced probably than we were, but we still, I was out of the war, but E Company still took Carentan that day.
Thank you, Mr. Tipper. I just want to say good luck to Kerry, to the crowd. His daughter Kerry will be running the Boston Marathon this Monday, so best of luck.
Everybody knows.
Yeah.
You have a question, George, or somebody else has a question? Got it.
I have a question for Mr. Arbiter. As an
This is for you, Izzy.
As an Auschwitz survivor, what quality or qualities do you think were needed that enabled you to survive that terrible experience?
What were the
What qualities in your
in
life or
it?
your experience there enabled you to survive that horrible experience?
Did you hear that?
Is that
What qualities that you had
in your life?
made you be able to survive being in Auschwitz and to survive the other camps that you were in? Was it something internal? Was it youth? What was it?
Thank you.
I don't think that you needed any special quality. You needed a little luck and help. And I was fortunate enough to get help from people in different camps that I know. Keep in mind, I come from a family, my father, my mother, and we were 5 brothers. My mother used to say she has a basketball team, 5 boys. In 1942, in a town we were in, Starahovice, in the middle of the night, without any prior warning, SS troopers came into the ghetto with barking dogs, flying rifle butts, and ordered all the entire Jewish population out to assemble in the center of the town. Over there, a selection took place. The Germans selected those who, in their opinion, were capable of performing slave labor. They needed workers to work in their industries because the young men and women were in the military. That day was the darkest day of my life, which is still with me today. Because during this election, I and 2 of my brothers were selected to one column, say on the left side. My parents and my 7-year-old brother were selected on the other side of the column. I was never away from my parents. I was never away from my family. And I didn't want to be separate this time either. And so I sneaked back over to the column where my parents were. And I said to myself, whatever happened to the members of my family, let it happen to me too. We're going together wherever we have to go. My father at that time realized what is taking place here. And he said to me and to 2 of my brothers, children, go back over there, save yourself. And if you'll survive, remember to carry on with Jewish life and Jewish tradition. Those were the last words that I heard from my father. They took them away. They were taken to a concentration death camp in Treblinka, and they were gassed and cremated there the same day. I and 2 of my brothers were sent to another camp in that city where there was an ammunition factory. And we were assigned to work in various places. My first job was being assigned by the community council. There was a Jewish community council. And so you had to go there and register in order to get a ration card. The only way you could get a ration card if you were assigned to work. I was assigned by the community council to work in the Gestapo. Now, I'm sure that you all know what the Gestapo is. Don't think for a minute that I was a Gestapo agent. I was doing labor work. I had to come in the morning, shine the officers' boots, clean the auto, and do other various work. I was mistreated. I was beaten. And I went back to the community council crying and said, I can't work there. Please send me to another place of work, which they did, and they sent me to ammunition factory. Remember that when the war broke out and the Germans came into Poland, where I was living with my family, I was 14 years old. At the age of 14, I was declared a slave, condemned to death for the only crime I have committed, because I was born to Jewish parents. For that, I had no right to live. In 1942, at that time, I was in that camp working in an ammunition factory. The conditions in that camp were so bad that people couldn't last there very long. In the winter of 1942, just a few months after we arrived in that camp, due to the conditions of bad food and unreasonable, unusable facilities for water and toilet and so forth, an epidemic of typhoid broke out. Then the Germans took one of the barracks, Barrack 5, and placed and made this a quarantine, and put in all those people that got infected with the typhoid sickness into that barrack. After a certain amount of people accumulated there, we had a camp commandant there by the name of Althoff, Willy Althoff. I'll be honest with you. I still today, although I know the man was talking and breathing and doing all the horrible things, I don't believe that he was not a German, he was not a human being. His greatest pleasure was to shoot people. He was having a little submachine gun hanging, and whenever he came in the camp, he was just shooting people for no reason at all. On Sundays, he usually invited guests to a show for an exhibition, how he is killing people. He was the camp commandant. And so when the sick people accumulated in that quarantine, he usually took them out into the closest forest and he shot them there. I was also inflicted with the typhoid. And then one night, we had the lights went on, and we had everybody out. And I'll make it very brief because I don't want to take up all the time. There were 87 people in that barrack that night in that quarantine. 86 people were shot right there. Only one came out alive. Only one escaped that night, and that's the one person that is sitting here and speaking to you now. I just want to go by fast because it's very important that I must finish with. I don't know whether I'm going to get more time, so I'm going to finish with this. Going through the different concentration camp in Auschwitz, and then in 1945, in the last camp where I was in Dautmergen, the American Air Force came and destroyed the camp. We could hear the artillery and seeing that the war is coming close to an end. We just didn't know whether we will live another hour and see the uniforms, to see that the liberators coming and freeing us. We were placed on the Dead March. The destination, which we found out afterwards, was to take us to abundant salt mines, place us in those salt mines, and there destroy us. On the third day, on the Dead March, in the middle of the forest, if anybody heard about the Black Forest, the middle of the highway, we were walking, and our guards abandoned us, left us in the middle of the highway, and of course we were liberated. So I saying this, and I wouldn't be able to finish without telling. I have the deepest respect and gratitude for men and women that I see in the uniforms. It is for the men in the uniforms. What we first saw, and especially you guys, you, in our opinion, called the liberators. Because if you wouldn't have come, another 3 months, and none of us would have survived the war. So my gratitude, my salute, And my thank you to you, men and women in uniform, for serving today and saving the lives of other people. And you, men, that liberated the concentration camps, although you did not liberate me or mine at the camp that I was on. But that doesn't make any difference. You liberated other people that otherwise would not be alive today. My deepest gratitude, my deepest thanks to you. I cannot tell you how much and how I can say thank you to you.
When Plotzk, Poland was invaded by the Germans in 1939, Izzy and his family buried several religious artifacts in the bottom of a basement in a house. In 2 weeks, we are taking Izzy back to that house where he is going to unearth those artifacts and look at them for the first time since 1939 and bring them back to his family. Question up there, please. Okay, we'll go over here first, George. Sir, front row.
I do not have a question, I have a comment. To the actors, we thank you for supporting the gentleman to your left.
Thank you.
And for Al, Ed, Babe, and Izzy, you are men among men, and we thank you very kindly.
The young lady in the upper left.
Hi, my name's Leslie Granger.
Speak loud, Leslie.
Oh, sorry.
That's
my name is
okay.
Leslie Granger, and my question is for the three members of Easy Company. Okay. What I wanted to know is, in your experience as veterans, having experienced combat, coming home, and transitioning back to that lifestyle, what has been the number one thing that civilians and individuals can do, to make you feel appreciated and supported?
The question is, coming back from war and coming back to the United States, what is the best thing that civilians here on the home front during your war could have done to make your transition better, to support you more? We saw in Vietnam that didn't go so well when those soldiers came home. What was it about that generation welcoming you back that made your transition easier?
Well, I think, my opinion, it took a lot of American women.
Cut! This is a different show. I know where you're going with this, but go ahead.
Let me tell you something. The American woman in this country, we'd all be up the creek. And you know what creek I'm talking about. And I've seen it. I come home on a weekend pass from North Carolina. Never knew what existed. In my street, you couldn't get a truck through, it was too small, the street. These women, including my mother, were out every morning with that hurdy-gurdy on their head, whatever the hell they use, and they had the broom, they had everything to clean the windows, the steps. We call them steps. New York, they call them stoops. I don't know why. In Philly, a stoop is a guy that's stupid. But this is true. What I'm telling you, I don't tell lies sitting here. But the woman was standing in a group, 5 of them. I can tell you their names right now. And they were talking, and I said, hey, Ma, I'm home. She said, go over to the house, babe. So I knew she was in a good mood. Call me babe. I went to the house. She's going to make soup. So before I walked into the house, I hear my mother holler, oh, my God, here he comes. And here comes a guy made the turn on the corner. He had a bicycle. He had a brown uniform on. He was the guy that delivered the telegrams. And they all screamed. And you know what they say? I ain't allowed to curse. But them women, it's all right for them. And they're my mother and everybody else's mother. And they hollered, oh my God. My mother said, look at this, look. And they looked up and they hollered, keep going, you son of a bitch. Keep going, you son of a bitch. And every time he would look like he was going to stop, they would say, keep going, keep going. And once he did, he stopped in front of Mrs. Nelson's house. Now, I'm witness to this. And he said, it's Mrs. Nelson's house. And they all... Here, he had his brace on his pants leg broke. And he got caught in the wheel of the bicycle. After he adjusted, he got back on, and he continued his ride down the street. And my mother came in the house, and I said to her, what do you get all excited about? I said, babe, that's the man that delivers a telegram. And it could have been your house, her house, Mrs. McCucken, Mrs. Daly, Mrs. Thompson. So then I knew. I said, how often does this go on? She said, every morning. Every morning we're out here doing the pavement, doing the steps, and we look for him. When he comes, then we got to worry. This is every day, all during that war. They were out there doing the steps, doing the pavement. They were all housewives in them days. None of them worked because they had big families. We had one family in the street. She had 16 children. Her name was Mrs. Gallagher. Never forget her. And they were all out there. So when they tell you about who the heroes is of any war, I can tell you, my vote, and I mean this very, very sincerely, we know the kids that got killed. We soldiered with them. But at least their pain was over. But the women, every day they had the pain and didn't get a telegram. Think about it. And as I've told these gentlemen before, how would you have liked to have been Mrs. Sullivan, who lost 5 boys, when that priest came knocking on her door with the commandant of the Navy? I'm talking to you like it should be said. And she heard a bang on the door. She looked out the window. She saw the priest. She opened up the door and she said, Father, which one? And he said, Mr. Sullivan, come inside. We want to talk to you. I went inside. And she didn't have to say anything. She knew it was bad. And the priest said, you lost all 5 of your boys. She didn't carry a child for 9 months. She carried 5 of them for 45 months. Washed them, bathed them, fed them. You tell me who the heroes of any war are. Don't tell me. I've been there. I see it. I don't say this just for the hell of it. I say it because it's true. It's true.
You're right,
We're
Ben.
nothing. What we did, we had to do because we wear pants.
Thank you, babe. We have a question over here. A young gentleman who's decked out and ready to jump out
Best
of a
dressed
C-47.
man in the room. Look at
Yeah,
it.
best dressed man in the room.
Hi, I'm Ethan Schultz from Dallas, Texas, and my question is for Al. Can you tell us a story when you jumped off the 34-foot building without a harness?
Okay.
I wonder if somebody translate.
One more question. We got
What?
a couple.
Story about the 34-foot
9:30.
building you jumped off of?
Okay.
The story about the
Oh, yeah.
34-story building.
I claimed that they recruited in a specific intent, and that was that they would find the dumbest guys they could find and put them in one unit. But we first got there, my friend Ed Pipping and myself, it was the camp was still under construction. And there was a big tented area off in the mud flats there. That was one place we called it Cow Company. It would have been a complete disgrace to be rejected and thrown into Cow Company to go somewhere else. So we were walking around there, and we saw this tower. It was about 35 foot high. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah, and 34, 35. And we said, boy, oh boy, we don't want to be chicken. They're going to have us jump off of that thing. So we went up and jumped off. And luckily it had been dug up and everything. We didn't break anything. We lit on our heads. And a lieutenant came along and said, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be jumping off of there like that. And we told him why we were jumping. Oh, no, he said, we haven't completed that thing yet. They were going to put a cable down, and we jump out, of course, and we come sliding down. You know, I'd like to add something to the question that the young lady asked up there, having to do and your question, Tim, relative to the reception when we came home. And that is that war was different. Everybody was in that war. Women, children, mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, soldiers. And so when the war was over, we were all coming out of the war, not just the soldiers. After that, it seems like all the wars were separate from the people at home. And the wars took place in other countries and that sort of thing. And our lives here in this country, because at that time I was not a soldier anymore, just went on as usual almost. And there was sort of a detachment to the people that were doing the fighting and ourselves, it seems like. And they didn't get the reception they should have. They should have been really brought home properly and reassembled and assimilated into our culture again. It was a terrible thing. I think there was a lot of difference too between the war in Europe and the war in the Far East. In the war in Europe, there was an awful lot of fighting and a lot of firing. And I don't know why I wasn't hit 15 times over. And people were just firing. Whereas in the Far East, it seems there was an intent to either kill you or maim you, preferably to maim you so you could take 4 or 5 more guys out of the picture, you know. I was lucky I was in Europe.
Yeah, if you've seen the Pacific, I thought the series did a great job of showing the brutality of the fight in the Pacific from Guadalcanal on. That that war wasn't fought by a Geneva Convention. There were no rules in the Pacific, and it was having been there, having been to Guadalcanal and seeing the conditions and knowing the enemy that you were fighting, that was. There were no villages that they could go into and have some Calvados or find perhaps a young French girl just to talk to. There was none of that in the Pacific, so it was just a totally different war. George, you have somebody up there who'd like to ask a question.
Hi, my name's Sergeant Matthew Shalafu from Massachusetts Army National Guard Infantry, 181st. I had the honor and the pleasure of serving with the 506th in Paktika Province in Afghanistan. And I just want to let you guys know that you are definitely, absolutely not forgotten in that unit. Every week, we had Band of Brother nights. We watched the series over and over. And the amazing part of this, when Dick Winters passed away, unfortunately, I wasn't there. I was hit with an IED, so I was in Walter Reed. But my lieutenant informed me when Mr. Winters had passed away, the 506 stopped all missions in Afghanistan on the day of his death. So, it's a big, big salute to you. You're not forgotten, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
The gentleman who talked was a member of the 506th in Afghanistan. The gentleman who talked was a member of the 506th in Afghanistan. Veterans who come back talk about watching. They're in a tent in the desert, and they're all gathered around watching Band of Brothers. And you know, I think what a tribute that is to you guys, that it's a different war. They're out in the desert fighting a different type of enemy, and yet they're gathered together and take motivation from their heroes. And I think that's what he said.
That's one of the greatest things that I've ever been told about the show. Is, and Jimmy will go with me on this. You know, we've traveled the world, and even when it's not involving Band of Brothers, I've been on other sets of other TV shows where people will come over to me, and usually military guys and women, and will say, I had a friend of mine, it's a brief story, but I was on set once, and a soldier who became an actor, and it was his first day, and we'd been doing a show for, you know, like a season, and he came over, and he was kind of a little sheepish with me, and you know, I was like, "You okay, kid? Everything good?" And he was like, "Yeah, I've just got to tell you, man." He said, "I've watched you and the guys every day for 2 years," and he had served in Afghanistan, and to hear that from you know, fellas like yourself, man. And by the way, thank you for everything you've been doing. And that goes for everybody in the room who has served. But to hear that, and to hear that this show has that impact and on today's military and today's men is absolutely, as Tim says, a testament to these fellas. I mean, we show up and pull faces. These are the real guys that did that, and so it's one of the greatest things that I can hear ever is from today's military who've watched the show. So thank you.
Very good. Another question, sir.
Yes, good evening. Thank you. Daniel Robillard. A two-part question. First one for Mr. Tipper and Mr. Luz while we're in the house. Is the fence cutting story accurate? Is it portrayed accurately in the miniseries? With
the fence cutting episode with Sobel, where the fence was cut, George Luz's dad was doing a Major Horton impersonation, did it very well, and there seemed to be some renegade cows that had made their way out. Was that a true story?
That all happened. It was true. But the thing that maybe was not included in this was that the cows went all over the landscape, and the English farmer that owned those cows presented a bill to the United States government and was paid handsomely.
And the second part, real quick, just because we haven't heard about it all night. Bastong. Anybody, Babe specifically, please, anything on Bastong that you could share?
Babe, could you talk a little bit about Bastogne? And I know you could go on for 4 hours, but just in terms of, because of the weather and everything else.
We can't talk a little bit about Bastogne. That lasted December the 17th to January the 27th. So there's a lot of stuff in there that wasn't shown, which couldn't be shown. They couldn't do that. But what do you want to know about Bastogne?
Well, one of your close friends was killed on Bastogne, and I know Julian, and I know even today, it's difficult for you around Christmas and New Year's because of his death.
No, we just sit home and don't bother. It just it gives you a lot of thinking to do, and of the kids, it was serious enough to lose a lot of men, but in other words, there wasn't no snowball fights like they had in the movies. The guys from California throwing snowballs and all, that was a lot of hooey. But no, Bastogne was bad. It was, we've had conditions there that just, you don't know that night. In fact, I'll tell you a funny one. It ought to be on the camera. It's about human nature. and being guys and gals and all that stuff. But we were on outpost one night, and me and Al Victoria, he was my assistant gunner, and we shared the same foxhole. And we were pretty tired. I thought we'd go right off to sleep because we lost a lot of men. We'd go 2 on and 2 off, or 2 on and 1 off, or whatever it required. And I'm laying in a foxhole. Al's, you get a 2-man foxhole in Canada, body heat, and takes up less space for the artillery shell to hit. Instead of 2 holes there, it'd be just the 1. But anyhow, I guess it was, we come back maybe 2, 3 in the morning. We hit the sack inside, wet, snow, everything in there, but warm, nothing warm about it. So I felt something in my back. I said, geez, what the hell's this? So Al, he's got his hand on my arm like this, and he's snoring like hell. So I give him a shot in the belly. I said, yo, Al, what's going on here? He said, no, what's the matter? They coming? I said, no, what's going on here? Nothing. Okay. I try to go back to sleep. About 5 minutes later, I wake up. He's got his hand up here. I said, oh, boy. I gave him this one in the belly. I said, Al, you! And I can't turn around because all the dirt comes down in on you and the snow. Al said, oh, honest, Hepburn, I swear. I'm all right. I was just dreaming of my wife. I said, dreaming of your wife? I'm in a goddamn foxhole with you, and you're dreaming of your wife. So I thought that was one of the funny things that ever happened in Boston. But you want to talk about war, that's war. And that's part of it. You don't want to face it, then you're kidding yourself. You're dirty, you're filthy. Went in Holland 78 days without a bath. I had one sock on for 6 days. I had to change it on the other foot. So the other one didn't get irrigated at the other one. But it's true. When I asked them, were they going to bring anything up, the supply sergeant come up in a Jeep one day with the colonel. And I asked him, I said, we need clothes up here. I got one sock. About 8 or 9 days now. Bring them up tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. Came with us, but not with him. No, we never. And I was in Holland. And while it was in Holland, instead of snow, it was, as these men don't pay, it was very deep water. And they say to you, you're going to have it easy. You're going into a barn. You won't have to lay out in the ground. We went into the barn. We certainly did. But the barn had no roof. So here we are back again. But we had a very, very serious incident that happened. Every morning on the dike, every morning, when we were up there, this German soldier would look at our lines, and he would go like this. The next morning, same guy, same thing. So we had a forward observer there. And he said, I'll get that. Well, he cursed. He ain't allowed to curse here. But anyhow, he said, I'll get him. He threw the artillery in. Gave him the reading. Boom. The artillery hit. Next morning, there's the German. He said, I got a surprise for him. Tomorrow morning, watch. Next morning, there comes the crowd. He was the most surprised guy in the world. His body ended up in Scranton. It was airburst over his head. The shell, instead of hitting, burst over his head. And all we seen was a lot of little pieces. The birds had a picnic because I'm telling you, this is what war is. This is what you have to face. So, whether you like it or not, you want the stories, you get them. You don't want to hear them, I don't belong here.
We have time for a couple more questions with the men.
CW2 Bill Henry, Rhode Island Army National Guard. Gentlemen, these days our veteran organizations are quickly depleting in our membership. What would you say to the young veterans and the young service members these days to encourage them to join the organizations so we can maintain the tradition and camaraderie of the military?
Veterans organizations, the membership is declining. What would you say to the younger generation to keep them active in veterans organizations, the Legion and others?
Well, I think they're fine organizations for one thing, and they help veterans, they help people to assimilate, they help them in times of need, they help them, and if people get the message out, I think there'll be a lot better response than there is. If they become self-serving, then they'll decline and fall away. That's when they reach out, is when they will get more people interested in their organizations.
Thank you, Al. How about one more question for this evening? Sir.
Question for Izzy. My daughter's best friend went through confirmation at her temple, and the rabbi pulled out an old Torah to read from. And he said this Torah was from a Czechoslovakian village that had been destroyed by the Germans. And they salvaged it and they repaired it. And they made those young children read from the Torah. Do you think it's important for the future generations to remember these stories in this generation? And what's the best way to do that?
Do you hear that okay?
No.
How important is it for future generations to remember these stories?
It's a very good question. It's very important. If we want to see a world where the tragedies of World War II, and especially the Holocaust, should never happen again, we must teach the young people, the future leaders of the world, the next generation, to remember, to speak about it, and to know what had happened. I've been speaking about this for the past 60 years. I've been invited several times to come to Germany and speak there, invited by the German government to speak there in high schools, what they call gymnasium, the highest grade before they go to college. We are going now next week on a special trip to Poland and to Germany to make a video, a documentary, which most of it will be distributed or contributed to schools for the students to learn of what we saw, what happened, and so they can remember. And I want to tell you this. When I first came to this country, speaking about the Holocaust was a no-no. Nobody wanted to know, nobody wanted to hear, especially the older generations. And if you want to know why, I can give you my opinion. Because the older generation, especially the leaders in communities, would have been asked right away, what did you do during the war? Where were you? Did you speak out? Did you write in the papers? Did you put pressure on the government to do something about it? And so they didn't speak about it. The younger people now want to know. The demand now is great. We have requests from schools in the entire area. I will be speaking next week in 3 places before we go to Europe, in 3 schools. Actually, 2 schools and 1 lawyer's office. The people want to know. The young people want to know. And so it is our obligation to tell them, to teach them, and to let them know. Because in the future, they are the future. You see, when you speak to young people in school, they will go home to their parents and tell them what they heard in school today, that this survivor came to school and he spoke about his experience, his life in the concentration camps, in the ghettos. When the elder generation, when you speak to the elder generation, they don't go home to their children and lecture them. They keep it to themselves. So it is the important part to speak to the young people, to the leaders of the future. And again, so that this tragedy will never, never, ever happen again. It is a tragedy because we thought after World War II, what was learned in World War II will be the end of it. But look what we have now. There is murder, killing of civilian populations going on in a lot of places over the world. People still didn't learn. People killed their own neighbors, their own friends. In cases, maybe their own relatives, because they're on the different side of the political forum. Look what's happening in Syria. What happened in Libya. What happened before in the former Yugoslavia, in the Balkan states. And where are and who is there? You, the men in uniform. You have fought, you have protected people all over the world since America's existence. Look at these men here. And I said sincerely, and I mean it, I wouldn't be sitting here. My friends wouldn't be sitting here, wouldn't be here, if it wasn't for these men that liberated us, defeated the Nazis, and gave us a new life, gave us a new chance. I came to the United States with nothing, as a living skeleton. I kissed the ground when I came to this country. Not because the ground is so sweet there, not because there was chocolate on the ground, because this country gave me the opportunity that I could not find any place in the world. It gave me the opportunity to restore my life and to prove to the world that I'm not useless, that I didn't have to be killed, and that I can be effective. And thank God, I have 3 generations that I very proudly have here. My son, I have 3 children. My son is over here, a very high position in the United States. My grandson, I have three children, 3 grandsons, and 2 great-grandsons. I defeated Hitler. Hitler wanted to kill me. I'm alive. He is dead. And I brought into this world very productive generations. I remember he is now my youngest grandson is now in college. But when he was about 10 years old, maybe even a little younger, he came over to me, and I don't know how that came to a young boy like this, and he says, "Grandpa, I'm happy I'm very happy that you survived and that you're here. If you wouldn't have survived, I wouldn't be here either.
Thank you, Izzy.
And so I'm walking proud in this country and very grateful what it had offered me and giving me a chance and giving me an opportunity. Thank you all.
When you think that during World War II, between 50 and 70 million people were killed, and you think about those who never had a chance after the war and what they could have done in their own professions, in their own lives. So these guys obviously feel very blessed to be here, and we're very blessed to have you and as part of this panel, and Ross and Jimmy as well for the great job they did bringing your story to life. So thank you very much.